Welcome to Ask Ms. ERP. The topic of this video is Pros and Cons of SaaS. Hello everyone, Ms. ERP here. In the previous two videos, I covered some pros and cons of platform or infrastructure types of clouds. This video is to focus on the pros and cons of software as a service, or SaaS. The points I will cover now apply to any SaaS application. But the more complex a system is, such as an ERP, the more these considerations may impact you. The first point that I would like to make about cloud application offerings is that some of them are not really SaaS. The reality is that in a lot of cases, particularly true for ERPs or enterprise asset management systems, your favorite vendor's cloud version is really just hosted in the cloud. You are running your own instance of the software on someone else's infrastructure. From your application vendor's point of view, preferably on their infrastructure. In this latter case, it is much like an on-premise application. You can likely do pretty much what you want with it. Modify, decide when to patch, whatever.
Wow!
True SaaS is all customers using the same code base, and you do not have the ability to modify that code. This is quite common now for smaller applications, but not yet so for the big complicated ones. The message here is to make sure that you understand what type of cloud application you are purchasing. The following points apply to true SaaS applications. A very common marketing feature of a SaaS application implementation is the speed to delivery. This is generally true if you account for the time to buy and set up infrastructure that is no longer needed. Otherwise, I would advise that a complex enterprise cloud application implementation is pretty much the same amount of effort as on-premise. You still have all the components of a large project, and as I have said before, complex systems remain complex, wherever they reside. A short implementation timeframe may not give you enough time to ensure critical tasks are completed. A very common miss is that security is not set up correctly, which is typically a complicated beast to sort out for an ERP. While on this topic, also watch that your security aligns with your licensing. Much easier to sort out before go live rather than after. Related to the speed of delivery is that SaaS providers will offer you included best practice business processes, which in theory should eliminate the need to document and understand your own business processes before you do any configurations. There is some truth to this, but in my experience, you will still need to understand and document your business processes to be able to configure your new SaaS system correctly. It is a more iterative process on SaaS. Understand how the system works and fit your business processes to what is available, rather than what we did in the past, which was to make the system match our processes. If you don't really understand your business processes, you might not factor in some legitimately needed special requirement at your company. You need to find these early on in your evaluation. This new make your processes work with the system methodology is still a lot of work, as you will encounter a fair amount of change resistance. Whether any application provides best practice processes is debatable, but unless it is a competitive advantage process, why do you need to be special? A lot of back office processes are pretty standard now. Being able to say, no, you can't modify in the cloud can be considered both a pro and a con. I consider it a pro, as you cannot make a mess, and it helps with any consolidation and standardization of processes that you are trying to do. The con is that sometimes just using configurations can only go so far. If the application cannot meet your business requirements, then your users will revert to Excel and shadow systems. I will have more to say on modifications in another video, but for now, just know that in the SaaS world, the option to customize is generally called extensions now, which is really extracting data, manipulating it, and putting it back. The most obvious pro with software as a service is the ability to easily stay code current, receiving bug fixes and new functionality with frequent updates, rather than the traditional monolithic and expensive ERP upgrades. The flip side of this is that these frequent updates could break existing processes or create new issues. Both a good and bad thing is that frequent updates result in a form of crowdsourced testing. As everyone is taking the updates, bugs are found more quickly. All cloud software will come with a set of rules that you must follow regarding updates, and in some cases, these might be quite rigid or dictatorial. For example, you may not have long to test, or the update schedule dates may not be convenient for your company. Make sure you know what that change schedule is long ahead of time, from major updates to how to get targeted one-off bug fixes, which may or may not be possible. Your SaaS provider may also not do a great job of notifying you about what is going on. In my experience, notifications are not timely and sometimes very cryptic. The success of these updates is really dependent on the quality of the vendor regression testing, which with the frequent fast turnaround is likely to miss something. It is also possible that the documentation provided with these updates is lacking, and you may find surprises after updates have been applied. Another consideration here is how to line up integrated systems for managing change. If you have a bunch of SaaS systems tied together, all with different update schedules, tracking what is happening when, where, becomes complicated. I would highly recommend that you investigate the use of automated testing tools wherever possible, so that you can streamline the time that you will need to test, again and again and again. Another pro of SaaS is that you have an easily accessible system, instantly updated for everyone at once. The con is that there might be variances in response time for your end users, depending on their location and technology capabilities. Internet accessibility, bandwidth, and even desktop settings can impact how well a SaaS system responds. And just like on-premise systems, transaction peak processing times such as month-end can cause performance challenges, more tricky to diagnose in the cloud with the many layers and parties involved. Lastly, SaaS costs. I like to describe this as rent versus buy, which depending on your situation could be either a pro or con. With on-premise applications, you usually have a large upfront capital purchase, with something like 20% of that purchase as an ongoing annual maintenance expense. SaaS costs are typically a monthly expense based on the number of users. Back to the security point I made earlier, those user counts are usually determined by what you have granted access to, not necessarily what the users actually need. And as you're in the cloud, the vendor can check on your usage anytime. I would recommend that you review your license compliance situation at least annually to avoid any surprises. Of course, please remember that the software is often the least expensive part of any ERP or other large complex system. I will have more to say on this in future topics around ERP implementations and support. This concludes the pros and cons of SaaS topic. I have a number of ideas for topics for Ask Ms. ERP, but I am also hoping that you will post questions that perhaps I can help answer. There is a link on askmserp.com to email me to ask questions or suggest topics for future videos. Thanks, and see you on the next video.